Good morning, namaste, and a very warm welcome to each one of you to the culminating day of the ninth edition of the TSDSI Tech Deep Conference 2026. We are truly delighted to have your presence both in person and virtually as we arrive at the final day of this significant conference that has sparked impactful conversations around our central theme shaping next decade of telecommunications, 6G standards, systems, and cross-sector synergies. My name is Ritika Dev, and I, along with my colleagues, Ms. Chandrakanta Rathore, Ms. Vishali Aparwal, Ms. Akansha Arora, and Ms. Shagun Dua, will be your hosts for today's proceedings. Before we commence with the much anticipated sessions, here are a few hygiene announcements to ensure a smooth and enriching experience for everyone. We have a power-packed agenda for today's, which include WRC 27 at our doorsteps, perspectives on IMT spectrum priorities, TSDSI technical session summary from session co-chairs, valedictory session and OTC award ceremony, which will be graced by Honorable Minister of Communications Jyotiraditya M. Scindia. Partner perspectives on the conference theme by representatives from global SDO and industry forums. On this note, let's start with today's session on WRC 27 at our doorsteps, perspectives on IMT spectrum priorities. Now, I would like to introduce our session co-chair, Mr. V.K. Roy. Mr. V.K. Roy is Advisor Networks at TSDSI. He served as Vice Chairman of ITUT Study Group 2 during 2022 to 24. He has also made notable contributions towards international standards development through active participation in ITUR, ITUT, 3GPP, and has worked as ITU expert in development of SOP for Bhutan's mission under ITUTD sector. He contributed significantly as drafting member of Bharat 6G Vision document. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the co-chairs of this session, Mr. Vinay Srivastav. Mr. Vinay serves as 6G ecosystem and standardization architect at Nokia with over 2 decades of experience spanning wireless systems, spectrum management, and international standardization. Vinay has contributed to the evolution of multiple generations of mobile technologies. He has made significant technical contributions to 3GPP championing India-centric normative work and is actively engaged in global spectrum studies, representing India in ITUR meetings related to WRC 27 preparation cycle. Vinay has also played an active role in shaping India's 6G journey through TSDSI, leading technical studies on future spectrum, next generation radio technologies, and ISAC. Our second co-chair for this session is Dr. Hanumanta Rao, who is the Director General of SAMIR and is a distinguished researcher with over 34 years of experience in RF, microwave, and millimeter wave technologies. With that, I now invite Mr. Vinay Srivastav to take the session forward and to introduce keynote speaker and handle the keynote segment.
Yeah, thank you, Ritika, for that introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good day to all Indian international audiences. On behalf of TSDSI and Nokia, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session titled WRC 27 at our doorsteps. Is this better? So, history tells us that with every technological revolution, there has been a race for a scarce and valuable resource. In the mid 1800s, it was gold. In 20th century, it was oil. And in this digital age, that resource is radio spectrum. Just as the nations that invested early in the infrastructure during gold rush reaped a long-term economic benefits, the countries that identify, harmonize, and make the spectrum available in time will be the ones which will lead the 6G race. India has kept its 6G ambitions no secret. Pradhan Mantri Shri Narendra Modi ji unveiled the India vision a few years back. As we move steadily towards the 6G era, spectrum once again finds itself at the center of the international connectivity agenda. Now, while the technological innovations take the limelights all the time, it is the timely identification and harmonization of spectrum which ultimately determines that how rapidly these innovations could be translated into commercial success. As we stand less than 2 years away from WRC 27, the global race is no longer about identifying or discovering the spectrum. It is more about building a technical consensus that will unlock this spectrum. The work being carried out at ITUR is therefore of strategic importance, not only for the global mobile ecosystem, but also for India's digital ambitions. India is uniquely positioned in this journey. It is among the very few nations who can potentially make more than 1 gigahertz of contiguous midband spectrum available for IMT, providing a strong foundation for future 6G deployments. More importantly, India has emerged as a proactive leader and contributor in WRC 27 from Region 3 and is helping build a technical basis for the future IMT identification. Against this backdrop, today's session brings together a distinguished panel representing policymakers, operators, global industry associations, and technology leaders who will discuss the key spectrum questions that will influence the evolution of 6G. We are privileged to have with us an exceptional lineup of speakers who bring deep expertise from their respective domains, and I am confident that today's discussion will provide valuable insights into both global direction as well as India's role in shaping the future spectrum roadmap. With that, it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Revati Manapalli. Ma'am, please. Dr. Revati is one of India's foremost experts in spectrum management and international radio communication, with nearly 3 decades of distinguished service spanning scientific research, telecommunication policy, and global spectrum governance. She began her career as scientist at WRC, followed by a stint at ISRO, and she joined the Department of Telecommunications in 1996. Since then, she has played a pivotal role in shaping India's spectrum management framework, major telecom policy reforms, and the regulatory evolution of the space communication sector. At the international level, she serves as member of the ITU Radio Regulations Board, contributing to the interpretation and application of radio regulations and equitable use of world spectrum and orbital resources. As the global community prepares for WRC 27, her perspectives carry particular significance given her unique vantage point at the intersection of India's spectrum policy and international radio communication governance. Few individuals are better placed to set the context for today's discussion on WRC 27 and future IMT spectrum priorities. Finally, many of you must be aware that Dr. Revati is also India's candidate for the prestigious position of Director of the ITU Radio Communication Bureau in the elections later this year. Her candidature reflects both her exceptional professional credentials and India's growing leadership in the global spectrum community. We wish her every success. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Revati Manapalli to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Vinay, for that nice introduction and kind words. Very good afternoon to you all. No one is on the dais. I'm the first one got the opportunity, okay? Distinguished speakers, delegates, and all my friends, colleagues from the industry, academia. I think it's a hybrid meeting. Hopefully people are there, international audience as well. Once again, good afternoon to you all. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to TSDSI for having this session on important topic of WRC 27 related to IMT, and also for inviting me to be part of this. I extend a warm welcome to all expert speakers, delegates, and especially those joining us from abroad and to this session. In this tech session, as you are already know, as introduced by Mr. Vinay, WRC 27 agenda items related to IMT will be discussing. Hence, naturally, the corollary is agenda item 1.7 that is related to IMT. And indirectly, we'll be discussing one more agenda item, that is agenda item 1.13. People are aware as direct to device, as direct to cell. So, as you all know, preparation for WRC 27 began 2.5 years ago, because last WRC 23 concluded in December 2023. Immediately, the work starts for WRC 27, because after WRC 23, followed by conference preparatory meeting for WRC 27, first meeting happened. Simultaneously, the work started at regional level, because India falls in the APT level and also at the national level in India. And you all know that WRC 27 will be held in Shanghai, China in October 18 to November 12, 2027. It will happen for 1 month, preceded by Radio Communication Assembly and followed by CPM 31 meeting. That is the way the structure is. Let me slightly touch upon with the ITU level. So ITU are study groups and their respective working parties initiated work on the agenda items immediately after the WRC and the first CPM 27 meeting. In particular, working party 5D and study group 5 is working on agenda item 1.7 because it is a responsible group. And working party 4C under study group 4 is working on agenda item 1.13, which is a responsible group. One is the terrestrial, another is the satellite. And almost studies have been carried out for extensive sharing and coexistence criteria. And they are currently in the process of developing draft CPM text, that conference preparatory meeting text. The CPM second meeting will be held in April in Geneva, and they will finalize the CPM report. And this CPM report is intended to assist the ITU member states and the radio communication sector members in their preparations for the conference. It provides the latest technical, operational, regulatory information relevant to WRC agenda items, which is very important to document because all these 4 years work is culminated into a CPM report. We are expecting that report by April. At the APT level, similar to that, we have a APG, that is APT Conference Preparatory Group, which has been constituted and already started its work. There are 2 meetings have been concluded and they've done the preliminary work. The 3rd meeting is scheduled this month in Japan, where mostly will be all the APT countries will be coming out with the what are the CPM text methods they are going to agree. India is also working on it. Coming to national level, we have already initiated our preparatory work 2.5 years back by constituting national study groups and national working parties in line with the ITU. Their structure mirrors the ITU structure. And these groups meet regularly and finalize Indian contribution to be submitted to the ITUR. With the support of all the stakeholders, including industry and all the government stakeholders, we have been actively contributing to these agenda items. Let us focus on 1.7 and 1.13 now because the current topic is that, including sharing and technical details and specification of incumbent services, because we need to protect our services not only in India, from the neighboring countries. That is a major concern for us. In India, you can do. In addition, we have also constituted National Preparatory Committee that for the WRC, chaired by the wireless advisor, and the structure is similar to the CPM chapters and similar to the APG. We have continuously having the meetings, and this structure closely aligns with the APG framework, where the APT preparatory group has also 5 working parties corresponding to the CPM chapter. Let me briefly touch upon the 2 agenda items and their current status. The first agenda item is agenda item 1.7, which talks about IMT spectrum. It talks about 3 frequency bands, basically. One frequency band, people all called it is C-band, that is 4.4 to 4.8 gigahertz. That is only in the region 1 and 3. India falls in region 3. And of course, region 1 is your Europe and Africa. Region 2 is Americas. There is another band, 7 to 8 gigahertz. starting from 7125 to 8400. Entire band in region 2 and region 3. In the region 1, certain 500 megahertz is excluded. Then comes the last band, that is 14 gigahertz band, where currently our MNOs, that is mobile network operators, are using for microwave access network, that is for backhaul connectivity. That is also in all the regions. These are the basic bands. If you see from the studies, more traction is going for the 7 to 8 gigahertz band. Why? Because it is a contiguous amount of, huge amount of spectrum is available. And little bit next level is the C band, because C band already deployments are there in the 5G. Then 14 gigahertz band is received relatively limited attention. As you know, as the frequency bands are higher, your coverage and you have the issues penetration. So if you see from the GSMA report, up to 400 megahertz of spectrum per operator will be required to support future 6G services. That's what they say. That is the ideal up to. Given that most of the countries on average have 3 to 4 mobile network operators, suitable candidates capable of meeting this demand is 6 to 7 gigahertz and C band. So hence you see the traction is for these bands. Coming to India's perspective, we have already identified 700 megahertz spectrum in the upper C band, that is 6425 to 7125 for the IMT. We are also working towards identifying additional spectrum contiguous to this adjacent through appropriate band segmentation, keep-off distances, and protection thresholds. With this aim, we have been contributing to ITU, including that CPM preparation. I am confident that we'll be able to provide the minimum contiguous spectrum required by all our 4 MNOs to enable meaningful deployment for 6G services. The government, with stronger participation from all stakeholders, continue to contribute actively to the work of ITUR Working Party 5D under Agenda Item 1.7. Let me tell, regarding this, we have also released Spectrum Roadmap for 6G services. Somewhere in the, I think last year, December 31st, we have released, which is publicly available, which provides visibility on the spectrum availability over a short term, medium term, and long term. What are the bands so that industry can plan? We have given this the first time we have released such a spectrum roadmap from the government of India. Now let me move to the another agenda item. That is agenda item 1.13, which is nothing but direct to device, direct to cell. Here, basically they are giving the frequency bands from 694 megahertz to 2.7 gigahertz. You all know these bands are heavily deployed in India by all the IMT operators, not only in India, throughout the world. So, sharing and compatibility studies with the incumbent services have already been completed, and the draft CPM text is currently under development. And till today, already for this week, a special session is going on in the Geneva to work on this particular agenda item, because a lot of work is going on this agenda item. And some of the key challenges that India has identified and on which we have submitted our concerns along with supporting study results to Working Party 4C are, I will just say, India is supporting only for FDD arrangements, frequency bands to be considered for it. Because once it is satellite, it should be uplink and downlink separation. With TDD, there are challenges, and which should be in line with ITUR recommendation 1036. And also we are concerned about different deployments within the FDD, because already we have some challenges with neighboring countries. We have raised that point and the studies are taken in this. Also, we have concern regarding reverse arrangements with the mobile satellite service and DC MSS IMT. This particular service is in technical terms called as DC MSS IMT. So we have a difference, reverse arrangement. So we have a challenges. Also, we have a specific concerns regarding the frequency band 2500 to 2690 because of incumbent MSS and BSS services and adjacent band radio determination services, that is our NAVIC. So as we move towards WRC 27, it is important that governments, industry, academia, standard bodies, and broader ecosystem work together to develop balanced and future-ready spectrum solutions. The decisions taken at WRC 27 will have a significant bearing on the evolution of 5G, advanced 5G, 6G, satellite communications, and emerging digital services. India remains committed to constructive engagement at the ITU, APT, and at national levels to ensure that the outcome of the WRC 27 supports innovation, efficient spectrum utilization, protection of incumbent services, and affordable connectivity to all. With this, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
No, please, please. Thank you, Dr. Revati, for that comprehensive summary and enlightenment on the global, national, and regional details of WRC 27 preparation. We are tight on time, hence, and our next speaker does not need any introduction. He is well known to the industry and academia alike. Mr. Stuart Cook, he is GSMA's Senior Director for Future Spectrum, and he oversees GSMA's range of advocacy issues and public policy. I would invite Stuart to kindly share GSMA's perspective on global, regional, and Indian, IMT prerogatives towards Agenda Item 1.7. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, Stuart, you are well audible, please.
Excellent, thank you. It is really great to be here and thank you so much for inviting me. And it's great that we have a spectrum session within this conference. Without spectrum and without standards, we won't have 6G, and spectrum and standards are really important, intertwined element that depend on each other. One of the questions we asked in the GSMA was, in the next decade, how much mobile spectrum will those major cities need? And so in the 2035 to 2040 timeframe, how much would a dense urban area need for mobile spectrum, and particularly 6G? And that's a very easy question to ask, but very hard to answer. And we've done a really deep study into trying to address that question. And this is the link. Don't worry, there's a short version and there's a long version. So please do take a look at the studies. But how much would those major cities in India require to support and enable 6G? Next slide, please. There are many things we could talk about in terms of what feeds into those future spectrum requirements and demands. We have the existing use cases. So XR, for example, and artificial intelligence both in the network, but also in the device and the consumer facing elements, all coming together. 6G being designed from the outset to enable really efficient network and device consumer AI-based experience. Smart glasses, as an example. I'm sure you've read about the Meta and Apple and Samsung and everybody else putting huge amounts of development teams onto XR. Digitalization will continue. Next slide, please. If we think about some of the future emerging use cases, sensing, that's a really interesting area for the technology and the standards teams to work. If you think of sensing as a radar, what extra capabilities does that enable, both at the network and the device? What extra services might that enable? There's lots of talk on holograms. In our study, we have not considered real-time holographic communications. We've maybe floated the idea that non-real-time holographic comms may be something in the longer term. And digital twins, a big area there. So please read the report. There's some use cases that expand and some emerging use cases. Next slide, please. And this is really exciting to see, I think. If we look at the predictions on 6G penetration into the next decade, starting the standards around 2029, initial deployments around 2030-ish onwards, and then beginning to ramp towards 2035, 2040. And at the end of the decade, 2040 timeframe, we are predicting, and I think with some confidence, that 6G will become the predominant mobile technology. 5G and 4G continue to be really important, a part of the operator's mix of technologies, but 6G is hitting prime time. And if you look at the regions and the countries, you know, we can be confident about China, Europe, GCC. It's great to see India as part of those early mix and deployments. Japan, Korea, Vietnam's got big ambitions, the US, etc. So that gives us a lot of confidence in terms of this prediction. And the number of connections could reach 5 billion by 2040. Next slide, please. And so there's lots in the report that feed into that total spectrum requirements and recommendation. But there are 4 elements. One is that by the end of this decade, in the 2030 timeframe, we're predicting, and a number of operators are publicly saying, that some parts of their network will begin to be capacity constrained in those urban areas if more spectrum is not available. We're predicting a global average of 2 to 2.5 gigahertz of total mid-band spectrum will be needed to support the development of mobile in those high demand countries. May also require even more spectrum. So the 2 to 2.5 gigahertz of total mid-band spectrum in the 2035 to 2040 timeframe is what we are saying is predicted to be needed. And it's great to see that India has developed this roadmap, this spectrum roadmap. It's really important that we have those national and regional and international harmonized spectrum roadmaps. And I think that's a part that India could be really influential around the world and in the region, promoting and bringing together a coalition of the willing on terms of what bands are we going to have for enabling 6G. It doesn't mean that the harmonized roadmap, some countries doesn't mean they need to make all of that spectrum available. It depends on their local requirements, but that harmonized roadmap is really important. And then we go on to say 3.8 to 4.2. Some countries around the world, previous slide please, are looking at 3.8 to 4.2, 4.5 gigahertz, and a lot of interest, that previous speaker said, in the 7 to 8 gigahertz range. Next slide, please. And so if we concentrate just on the 6 to 8 gigahertz, as we heard previously in the light red, this is the upper 6 gigahertz, the 6425 to 7125. And it's great to see that India has this in its roadmap. And that's a large amount of contiguous mid-band spectrum. And we really would encourage that to be made available to enable those wider channels. And then the World Radio Conference in 27, that's looking at the upper bit, extending the upper 6 into the 7 to 8 gigahertz range. And you can see a significant amount of potential mid-band spectrum from 6.425 up to whatever the conference will decide. At the moment, it's looking up to 8.4. It may be the outcome of a consensus is less than that, 775, 79. We'll see what the conference decides. But you can see the amount of spectrum and the amount of channels that could support. So how many 200 megahertz channels could it support? How many 400 megahertz channels it could support? And so around the world, some countries are thinking about initially 200, but a number are beginning to think about 400 megahertz channels. 3GPP is working, and the ITU is working towards those 400 megahertz channels, and that meets the capacity requirements, but also enables those really wideband services. And so real opportunity, I think, for the community in OPG and India to not only have a national roadmap, but also to work with with partners around the world to secure an international roadmap and an international identification for IMT spectrum. So I know you're short of time, but I wanted to focus on the 6 to 8 gigahertz range. How do we enable those 400 megahertz channels? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stuart, for giving us a perspective on the elements and the motivation behind the spectrum globally. With that, I would like to invite the next speaker. We have Mr. Ravi Gandhi. Does not need an introduction in this forum. He is the President and Chief Public Regulatory Officer at Reliance Jio. He is a PhD from IIT Delhi. And Dr. Gandhi is a distinguished leader in the telecommunications sector with over 3 decades of exceptional expertise in public policy and telecom regulation. He has also served as an ITS officer at the helm and is well known for his leadership across the industry as well as administration. With that, please join your hands, audience, for our next speaker, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you, Vinay, for such a nice introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes it's difficult or easy to speak after the eminent speakers who have spoken before me, Madam Revati and Stuart. I think both have covered the topic in a very excellent manner. Madam has already covered all the procedural aspects of identification of spectrum at ITU level and at the national level, including the spectrum roadmap which has been identified and declared by Government of India, and all the issues which are being handled, including related to Agenda 1.7 and Agenda 1.13. So I'll not repeat or go into the detail of that. And Stuart has already covered the one of the most important thing, which is the estimation of the demand, how much it would be. And I'm presuming we are discussing the demand for 6G, because that's the next thing which the industry is likely to see. So when we talk about 6G, and the first thing which comes in mind is what 6G would be, what kind of applications would be there in 6G, and how much would be the spectrum demand. So we have been discussing at various forums, including at the Bharat 6G Alliance, all the applications and the use cases of 6G, including sensing and AR, VR, AI, AI native networks, which have been discussed. So keeping that in mind, this topic is being debated, how much should be the carrier size. As Stuart said, 400 megahertz should be the carrier size, and the estimation, global estimation of spectrum is 2 to 2.5 gigahertz per geography. And in the high demand geography, it should be around 2.5 to 3.3 gigahertz. And where India falls, I would just like to share a few numbers. In India, we run the networks combined with over 3.2 million BTSs, serving 1.26 billion customers, which is extraordinarily high as compared to any other country of the world. If we see the data consumption, so the data consumption per customer in India is in the range of around 37 GB per month. As compared to global average, if we see, it is almost 1.8 to 1.9 times than the global average of the data consumption. That is one factor that shows our demand per customer is much higher than the global average. Second, the population density. So it is not only the demand per customer, but the demand in per unit of area, say demand per square kilometer. So the population density in India is around 491 people per square kilometer. which is much higher than the global average and majority of the countries which are normally studied. So that also tells us that demand per customer is almost double, and the demand required in per square kilometer is also higher than the global average. So that is the second factor which goes into when we have to plan the spectrum. There is third factor, which is of course linked to the first one, why the demand on mobile side is higher, much higher than the demand on the at the global level, because the wireline penetration in India is very less. So globally, if you see, almost 80% of the traffic is carried on the wireline network, and 20% network traffic is carried on the wireless network. But in India, it is the other way around. Over 65% of the traffic is carried on the wireless network, and only 35% traffic is carried on the wireline network. So that changes the whole dimension of the network planning in India, and spectrum is the most critical part, because when we are planning the capacity, coverage, and network, the spectrum goes into that. That's everything gets planned around that. So the inputs which goes into the planning is the capacity required in the areas, especially all the large cities, towns, which are extremely densely populated as compared to majority of the cities of the world. Then the requirement in absence of wireline. And third, of course, the average usage pattern in India is also higher globally because of the digital India and the kind of applications which have been developed in the country, including the dependence on whether it is UPI or any other applications. So we have moved faster on the digitization path. So that's why our demand is also high. So the moment we put these three elements into our planning, the demand for India goes on the higher side. So as Stuart said, higher side is actually moving from 2.5 gigahertz to 3.3 gigahertz for the high demand countries. So safely we can say around 2.5 to 3 gigahertz should be planned for the IMT networks in the country. And this is the demand which is likely to come in the mid-band, and Department of Telecom has done, I think, extremely good work in coming out with the roadmap and identifying various bands. Of course, this is a continuous process. It will continue. The industry will keep on demanding the demand, and more band will have to be identified. So that's where we would need support from government to not only to identify the bands, but also to take it forward to ITU in the ITU process of harmonization, identification of the bands, etc. And then refarming internally and providing to the industry so that industry is able to roll out the services. If suppose, if we go by what GSMA said, 400 megahertz carrier, so that means the all operator would require that kind of a spectrum in somewhere in 2028, 29, when 6G is about to come. So that is the uphill task probably which WPC has to take and ensure that the industry do not lag behind their international counterparts in terms of spectrum and the resources required for this. So with this, I would end that, because that is the major thing which I wanted to bring to the notice of everyone. Most critical, which is band, which is going to be, as Revati Madam also talked about, is 6.4 to 7.1 to 8.4. So that's where I think we'll have to focus during WRC 27 also, and we have to ensure that we get that complete band for us. That I think is one of our requests to the ma'am. I think you know, you are smiling means we would be able to resolve it. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ravi, for providing us the perspective from Indian operator, the national spectrum demand, and the key differentiation in Indian market compared to the global ones. With that, now that we have had comprehensive inputs and perspectives on agenda item 1.7, which is focused on the new spectrum bands for IMT, let's steer our focus towards another critical agenda item in WRC 27, which is agenda item 1.13. This is focused towards the use of IMT spectrum by MSS, and Revati ma'am briefly touched upon it. Our new next speaker, my dear colleague, Mr. Theodoros Potopoulos from Nokia, will enlighten us on this particular topic. Theo is a senior specialist in Nokia Spectrum Standardization Group, and he has previously served with Inmarsat and Ofcom. At Nokia, Theo leads the organization's international spectrum regulatory strategy towards the emerging technologies, NTN being one of them. I'm sure he would be able to enlighten us on the other aspects and challenges towards agenda item 1.13 and the probable questions and perspectives on the synergy between terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks and harmonization in future. Theo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Vinay, and good day to everyone. I'm glad to be in this conference with you, even virtually. My presentation is referring to the perspectives of the convergence between TN and NTN. So, how I would like to start this presentation, maybe if we can jump to the next slide, is by giving a brief overview of the broader term NTN, if you like. So there are various domains of NTN, either satellite backhauling or satellite home broadband. But where I'm planning to focus here is on the satellite direct to device, and I'm given here a kind of map or schematic just to demonstrate how different variations, if you like, of this direct device are implemented today or are planned to implement it in the future. So there are two options for implementing direct to device. One is regarding spectrum, at least. One is using MNO spectrum, the IMT spectrum, as we call it, and that the technology that is related to that at the moment is what we call pre-release 17 of 3GPP, which is based on the terrestrial network specifications and adjusted in the satellite so that they can take into account and address or the propagation and time delay challenges. And this can take, and the other option is is using MSS spectrum, so the satellite network operator spectrum, which at the moment we see has applications in proprietary type direct to device, or in NTN 3GPP post-release 17 NTN type of technology. And in terms of spectrum, of duplex, we see that the majority or the vast majority of implementations take place over FDD variations. Of course, there is in 3GPP one TDD variation, which is specifically to one company, to Iridium, and it's for narrowband IoT. And there are a few discussions around different variations in WRC agenda item 1.13. So as you can see, the current implementation, or at least the majority of current implementation, use the terrestrial network specs using MNO spectrum. And as we move forward in 3GPP, the NTN specifications will get more mature, and we will eventually reach the desired convergence in 6G. So if we move to the next slide. Thank you. So here we have done a study at Nokia where we tried to benchmark the capacity of direct-to-device. And we didn't do that to demonstrate what's better or what's worse, but we wanted to kind of give a perspective of what can be achieved, what's the quality of service, and what this service really is. So I would focus on the box that there is there at the bottom of the screen, where we compared the possible capacity that can be achieved in deep rural areas compared to let's say, terrestrial network versus a satellite network that offers D2D. And you can see that in those scenarios, the efficiency that D2D offers is significantly less. Well, we calculated 4 to 73 times less compared to terrestrial networks. Of course, there are the different scenarios applicable there. That, as I said, is not intended to give any wrong impression. It's just to emphasize that really the direct-to-device service is meant to complement the terrestrial coverage. It can be used to close the coverage gap, as GSMA has defined it rightly, which is approximately the 4% of the population that does not live under the terrestrial coverage. And it, of course, can offer an additional layer of resilience when terrestrial networks happen to fail due to disasters, or when there is a need for improved recovery. So, and I have the link there for you to visit if you like. So if we move to the next slide, please. As I said, this direct-to-device service is currently a hot topic, as it was discussed earlier in this session, in WRC 27 cycle, and it's under agenda item 1.13 in bands below, in mobile bands below 2.7 gigahertz. And I just wanted to give you a very brief overview of what we think are some of the priorities that should be taken care or discussed further for this agenda item. One is, of course, to establish appropriate limits for the protection of the terrestrial service. And I have a figure there where I show a possible scenario for the UE, for the handset, but of course there is a need to develop appropriate methods, regulatory methods for the base station, for the protection of base stations as well. So we see that the aggregate PFD is probably the most likely regulatory metric to protect UEs, while the EPFD is probably the most appropriate method for the base stations. In the middle figure, I have another interesting topic or aspect that this introduction of D2D will bring, and I have the African region there just because we did a study recently, but it's applicable to your region as well as in other continents in the world. It's the tri-border scenario where let's say if you have three countries that neighbor, and we have marked there some examples in Africa, for example, where if you have two countries having authorized this direct-to-device service in the same frequency band, served by two different satellite operators, then there is a risk to actually result in some aggregation in the third region, where may or may not have authorized this service. And it's important to take this aspect into account so that we can appropriately protect terrestrial networks. And some other requirements or priorities in the regulatory discussion under this agenda item is, of course, to ensure that the authorization of direct-to-device is under the MNO license, which of course offers an additional, let's say, safeguard of this complementarity nature of the device, as well as to have a methodology that verifies the compliance with the limits, rather than ending up with interference and having to enforce the service after it's being authorized. And finally, as it was mentioned as well at the beginning of the session, it's important to make sure that when we authorize this service, the directionality is supported by the terrestrial networks in the region or in the country that they are authorized. If we can move to the next slide, and I'll be quick. I think I have this and one more. Some aspects of spectrum as well, which I think were mentioned at the beginning. We see that the FDD spectrum provides the highest potential for this direct-to-device service, as long as, of course, it's being supported by the terrestrial networks. TDD bands or TDD frequency arrangements present significant challenges. Some of them are shown in these figures below. So it's very difficult. You know that TDD networks are synchronized with each other so that they don't cause interference, which means that they transmit and receive at the same time. But when we have satellites using a TDD spectrum, a spectrum that is used in a TDD way from terrestrial networks, and let's say that the footprints are elongated due to the different elevation angles that satellites have, and they have to illuminate in different locations. It's very, very challenging, and I don't want to say impossible because you never know, but it's extremely challenging to have one frame structure synchronized with, let's say, an area of, as we show here, 350 kilometers, that's because they have different propagation delays, which of course results in transmitting in an uplink in the uplink of terrestrial networks or receiving in the downlink of terrestrial networks. So there is this challenge, and of course, if you try and play a little bit with the frame structures, you will realize that there are significant efficiency losses when TDD spectrum is used for D2D, where we have the example here where we try to utilize both uplink and downlink slots, and the resulting efficiency loss was about 60% compared to terrestrial networks. So yes, FDD bands are providing the highest potential and the flexibility, but when we are talking about TDD bands, there are significant challenges that haven't been addressed, and as we know so far, there is no plan in standardizing those in 3GPP. So if we move to the last slide, which I think is my final one, to have some summary of the key aspects that I mentioned. Direct-to-device, as I said earlier, is providing some promising potential to cover to close this coverage gap, this 4% of population that lives under no mobile coverage, and it is offering a potential to complement the terrestrial network service. Of course, the licenses should be under the MNO licenses so that it can be better controlled and also ensure this complementarity. It's important to have regulatory measures and metrics that are deterministic and provide to the MNOs the certainty that their investments and their networks are protected. And finally, as I mentioned in the last slide, not all spectrum is providing the same opportunities for D2D. FDD bands are having a greater potential, while TDD bands offer challenges which so far have not been addressed, neither in regulation or standardization. Thank you very much. I hope I was within time, and happy to engage in a discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. That was a comprehensive, summary on agenda item 1.13, a very crucial one. And because we are now short on time, and also the speakers have been very comprehensive in their address. Many of the questions which we received and we had prepared have already been addressed. So I would use this left of time for a quick rapid fire, and I'll go across all the speakers. I would request Stuart and Theo to keep their cameras and mics on. Sir, you may please pick up those things. So let's start with WRC 27. Your perspective in single sentence. WRC 27 will be successful if, Mr. Ravi Gandhi. I'd say WRC 27 will be successful if
we get sufficient spectrum for 6G.
Dr. Revati, please.
If we get a resolution for agenda item 1.13.
Okay. Stuart, your take, please.
If we get spectrum identified for IMT.
Theo. It would be interesting to hear you out as well.
Yeah, well, I concur with all the previous speakers. Touching on agenda item 1.13, I would say that WRC will be successful if it enables terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks to complement each other and not compete each other.
Thank you. The next one, now that we are talking about 6G here, 6G spectrum, in one sentence, what is the single biggest spectrum challenge for 6G? And we'll start with Dr. Revati this time around. What is the single biggest spectrum challenge that you see for 6G?
How to give them contiguous spectrum in mid-band? That's the biggest challenge.
Dr. Ravi?
To identify the sufficient quantity.
Stuart, your take, please. What is the biggest spectrum challenge for 6G?
International consensus and leadership.
Theo, your take.
Yeah, to make sure that sufficient spectrum is there for future evolutions of mobile.
Sure. So one last one, and we'll quickly go through. As the NTN and terrestrial systems converge, what new spectrum challenges should regulators begin preparing for today? In brief, one sentence, and we'll start with Stuart this time around.
I love this format. It's great. National roadmaps that are implemented, international harmonization.
Theo, your take, please.
Yeah, I think it's not about finding more spectrum for D2D, but it's more about finding the right spectrum for D2D, right? The one that can provide D2D innovation, but at the same time protect the incumbent services.
Okay, we'll move to Dr. Revati. I'll repeat the question. As NTN and terrestrial systems converge, what new spectrum challenges should regulators begin preparing for today?
So far, IMT is the terrestrial limited geographies. Once it becomes to DTD, it is a NTN services. I see global harmonization is a major challenge, being a satellite service.
Dr. Ravi, what do you see as the biggest regulatory challenge for TN and TN
I
convergence?
think this goes with, there should be anonymity in this. International harmonization is going to be the biggest challenge in this. So even within country harmonization also would be a challenge, but that can be addressed once international harmonization is done.
Thank you very much. So today we heard the perspectives from policymakers, global mobile ecosystem representatives, operators, and the technology leaders. As we conclude this session, let me leave you with a few reflections. First, India has once in a generation opportunity. As the WRC 27 approaches and the transition towards 6G happens, India is uniquely positioned in its ability to provide continuous contiguous band to IMT, and it's working towards making regional consensus, technical consensus. Second, today's discussion also has reminded us that spectrum is far more than a technical resource. It's a strategic national asset. Every major leap in mobile communication has been underpinned by timely spectrum identification, global harmonization, and evidence-based coexistence studies. The work currently underway in ITR will lay the technical foundation upon which WRC 27 decisions will be made. And India is no longer just participating, we are helping shape these decisions through technical studies, leadership in regional and international forums. So, as we move ahead, the biggest challenge which 6G will face in WRC 27 for me would be a balanced outcome which provides an equitable access to all, also a spectrum distribution which provides good coverage in terms of both terrestrial as well as non-terrestrial networks. With that, I would like to thank all the eminent speakers, keynote speakers, and overall all the audience present here as well as online for their participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay, for your inspiring concluding remarks. Before we move on, we kindly request all participants to share their valuable feedback on today's session. Thank you once again for your enthusiastic participation and active engagement throughout the session. We now invite you to stay with us for the next segment of the conference, the technical session summary, where highlights and key takeaways from the technical sessions will be presented. With that, I am pleased to hand over the dais to my co-host, Ms. Vaishali, who will host the technical session summary. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference. We look forward to your continued participation.
Thank you, Ritika. Uh, Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I, Vishali Uparwal, welcome you all to the TSDSI Tech Deep Dive Conference 2026. We are now moving into the hybrid tech session summary segment. Over the last few days, we have hosted 6 insightful technical sessions covering key themes shaping next decade of communications, 6G standards, systems, and cross-sector